The first hint of war came not with sirens, but with a whisper in the air, a subtle tension that made the hairs on Avery Carter's arms stand on end. She had been awake before dawn, running pre-flight checks on her F-15E Strike Eagle at Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar, when the alert came through. Global situation escalated. Orders pending deployment. Avery, call sign Rook, sat in the cockpit staring at the screens. Nothing could prepare her for the chaos that was about to unfold. Her squadron of elite pilots was a first wave of what the Pentagon called Operation Epic Fury. But all Avery could feel was the gnawing, cold dread in her stomach. Not for herself. She'd flown missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. But for the people who would be caught in the storm this time. Civilians, families, innocent lives trapped in a war that was no longer just political maneuvering. It had become a collision of nations. She flicked switches, ran through the checklist she knew by heart, and felt her pulse synchronize with the rhythm of the engines. The hum of the F-15 beneath her fingers was comforting, almost like an old friend, but the calm was deceptive. Outside, the Persian Gulf shimmered in the pre-dawn light, unaware of the storm about to descend upon it. Then came the first reports: missile launches, air defense systems activating, radar screens pinging with unidentified aircraft moving at high speeds. Avery's stomach twisted. This wasn't a drill. This was the opening salvo of a war that could redraw borders, topple governments, and reshape the world economy overnight. She remembered the last conversation with her sister back in Ohio. "Don't do anything reckless, Avery," her sister had said, her voice trembling. Avery laughed, trying to hide the tension. Reckless? No. Brave, precise, calculated. That was her code. But even she couldn't hide the creeping fear in her chest. This time it's different. This time it's bigger than any mission I've flown. Orders came down through the chain of command. Deploy to the Persian Gulf. Immediate engagement if necessary. Recon and strike capabilities on standby. Civilians and allied forces in potential danger zones. Coordinate rescue operations if required. Avery ran through the mission parameters, her mind moving faster than the jets in the hangar. Her squadron was tight-knit, each member chosen for skill, nerve, and loyalty. Yet even with the best training, she knew nothing could fully prepare them for the chaos that awaited them. Every sortie would demand split-second decisions, and every mistake could be fatal. As dawn broke over the desert horizon, the first jets lifted off the runway, engines screaming against the cold air. Avery's F-15 roared to life, climbing into the sky, leaving the base behind. Below her, the world looked serene, but she knew better. The skies were about to erupt in fire, and she would be at the center of it. Communication channels crackled. Her wingman, call sign Falcon, checked in. "Rook, you copy? Intel says this could get messy." "Copy, Falcon. Brace for anything. Eyes open." Avery's voice was steady, though her hands tightened around the throttle. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the mechanical symphony of jets cutting through clouds. Then it happened. Radar blips multiplied, each one a potential threat. The enemy had anticipated their presence. Missiles streaked across the sky like falling stars, and anti-aircraft fire blossomed in the distance. Avery's stomach twisted. This wasn't a drill. This was the opening salvo of a war that could redraw borders, topple governments, and reshape the world economy overnight. She remembered the last conversation with her sister back in Ohio. "Don't do anything reckless, Avery," her sister had said, her voice trembling. Avery laughed, trying to hide the tension. Reckless? No. Brave, precise, calculated. That was her code. But even she couldn't hide the creeping fear in her chest. This time it's different. This time it's bigger than any mission I've flown. Orders came down through the chain of command. Deploy to the Persian Gulf. Immediate engagement if necessary. Recon and strike capabilities on standby. Civilians and allied forces in potential danger zones. Coordinate rescue operations if required. Avery ran through the mission parameters, her mind moving faster than the jets in the hangar. Her squadron was tight-knit, each member chosen for skill, nerve, and loyalty. Yet even with the best training, she knew nothing could fully prepare them for the chaos that awaited them. Every sortie would demand split-second decisions, and every mistake could be fatal. As dawn broke over the desert horizon, the first jets lifted off the runway, engines screaming against the cold air. Avery's F-15 roared to life, climbing into the sky, leaving the base behind. Below her, the world looked serene, but she knew better. The skies were about to erupt in fire, and she would be at the center of it. Communication channels crackled. Her wingman, callsign Falcon, checked in. "Rook, you copy? Intel says this could get messy." "Copy, Falcon. Brace for anything. Eyes open." Avery's voice was steady, though her hands tightened around the throttle. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the mechanical symphony of jets cutting through clouds. Then it happened. Radar blips multiplied, each one a potential threat. The enemy had anticipated their presence. Missiles streaked across the sky like falling stars, and anti-aircraft fire blossomed in the distance. Avery's stomach twisted. This wasn't a drill. This was the opening salvo of a war that could redraw borders, topple governments, and reshape the world economy overnight. She remembered the last conversation with her sister back in Ohio. "Don't do anything reckless, Avery," her sister had said, her voice trembling. Avery laughed, trying to hide the tension. Reckless? No. Brave, precise, calculated. That was her code. But even she couldn't hide the creeping fear in her chest. This time it's different. This time it's bigger than any mission I've flown. Orders came down through the chain of command. Deploy to the Persian Gulf. Immediate engagement if necessary. Recon and strike capabilities on standby. Civilians and allied forces in potential danger zones. Coordinate rescue operations if required. Avery ran through the mission parameters, her mind moving faster than the jets in the hangar. Her squadron was tight-knit, each member chosen for skill, nerve, and loyalty. Yet even with the best training, she knew nothing could fully prepare them for the chaos that awaited them. Every sortie would demand split-second decisions, and every mistake could be fatal. As dawn broke over the desert horizon, the first jets lifted off the runway, engines screaming against the cold air. Avery's F-15 roared to life, climbing into the sky, leaving the base behind. Below her, the world looked serene, but she knew better. The skies were about to erupt in fire, and she would be at the center of it. Communication channels crackled. Her wingman, callsign Falcon, checked in. "Rook, you copy? Intel says this could get messy." "Copy, Falcon. Brace for anything. Eyes open." Avery's voice was steady, though her hands tightened around the throttle. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the mechanical symphony of jets cutting through clouds. Then it happened. Radar blips multiplied, each one a potential threat. The enemy had anticipated their presence. Missiles streaked across the sky like falling stars, and anti-aircraft fire blossomed in the distance. Avery's stomach twisted. This wasn't a drill. This was the opening salvo of a war that could redraw borders, topple governments, and reshape the world economy overnight. She remembered the last conversation with her sister back in Ohio. "Don't do anything reckless, Avery," her sister had said, her voice trembling. Avery laughed, trying to hide the tension. Reckless? No. Brave, precise, calculated. That was her code. But even she couldn't hide the creeping fear in her chest. This time it's different. This time it's bigger than any mission I've flown. Orders came down through the chain of command. Deploy to the Persian Gulf. Immediate engagement if necessary. Recon and strike capabilities on standby. Civilians and allied forces in potential danger zones. Coordinate rescue operations if required. Avery ran through the mission parameters, her mind moving faster than the jets in the hangar. Her squadron was tight-knit, each member chosen for skill, nerve, and loyalty. Yet even with the best training, she knew nothing could fully prepare them for the chaos that awaited them. Every sortie would demand split-second decisions, and every mistake could be fatal. As dawn broke over the desert horizon, the first jets lifted off the runway, engines screaming against the cold air. Avery's F-15 roared to life, climbing into the sky, leaving the base behind. Below her, the world looked serene, but she knew better. The skies were about to erupt in fire, and she would be at the center of it. The calm of dawn shattered in an instant. Explosions erupted across the horizon like fireworks gone horribly wrong. Avery Rook Carter's F-15 cut through the sky, engines screaming, flares blazing as missiles streaked past her cockpit in deadly arcs. Her squadron had barely scrambled when the full fury of the enemy hit them, faster, smarter, and far more aggressive than intelligence had predicted. "Falcon, watch your six," Avery barked into her headset. The crackle of radio chatter was drowned by alarms and the roar of engines. She could see her wingmen twisting and turning to evade an incoming missile, but seconds later, the missile slammed into his tail. "Falcon, no!" she screamed, but all she could do was watch a streak of flame consume him before he disappeared from radar. Her stomach churned, a mix of adrenaline and the deep, gnawing dread she had tried to push away since the first reports of war. But there was no time for grief, not yet, not when dozens more enemy jets were slicing through the sky toward her. She flipped a switch, engaging countermeasures. Flares burst into the air, dazzling infrared-guided missiles. Her F-15 shuddered violently, a missile narrowly missing her wingtip. She banked sharply, pulling the G-forces hard, feeling the familiar pressure against her chest, legs, and neck. Her training took over. Every maneuver, every evasive action, every shot fired was precise. She was no longer just Avery, she was Rook, a single point of resistance in a storm of chaos. Suddenly, a call came from command. "All units, ground forces under heavy fire in Bandar Abbas, civilians in danger, evac protocols engaged, provide air support immediately." Her jaw tightened. The mission had shifted. No longer just air superiority. Now she had to protect lives on the ground. She adjusted her flight path, weaving through anti-aircraft fire, the sky a blazing inferno around her. Below, the city looked surreal. Smoke spiraled into the sky like black serpents, buildings ablaze, vehicles overturned in frantic attempts to escape. Families clung to each other in narrow alleys as chaos rained down from above. Avery's heart ached at the sight, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. Hesitation could cost lives, theirs or hers. She radioed in coordinates for a precision strike, targeting enemy fortifications, threatening the fleeing civilians. Her fingers moved over the controls with unerring precision, releasing ordnance that landed exactly where intended. Explosions erupted, but this time, carefully calculated, designed to protect rather than destroy. "Target neutralized," she reported, but relief was fleeting. Enemy jets regrouped, fighters now attacking in coordinated waves. Missiles screamed past her cockpit, and debris from anti-aircraft defenses exploded around her in deadly showers. Rook banked sharply, barely avoiding a missile that streaked past her canopy. She could feel the heat radiating through the metal. The smell of smoke filled the cockpit, acrid and suffocating, even through the sealed environment. Every instinct screamed survive, yet she refused to retreat. There were people depending on her, lives she had promised to protect. Another alert. A drone strike had gone awry nearby, endangering civilians. She adjusted her targeting system, pulling off a high-risk maneuver to redirect the payload, ensuring the strike hit enemy positions without harming innocent lives. The tension was unbearable. One wrong move could mean disaster. And then she saw him, a young soldier, pinned behind a crumbling wall, taking fire from enemy snipers. He was visible only for a fleeting second before disappearing from view. Rook didn't hesitate. She dove low, weaving between bursts of gunfire and debris, guiding the man's escape through her headset. Every second counted. Every heartbeat mattered. A missile streaked past, too close to call. She twisted the F-15 sharply, feeling the jet scream under the strain. Sweat ran down her forehead, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it. The soldier reached cover, waving frantically in acknowledgement. A small victory, yet monumental in the chaos of war. Minutes bled into hours. Her squadron was decimated, numbers dwindling with every engagement. Yet she pushed on, coordinating strikes, rescuing trapped soldiers, and guiding fleeing civilians from above. Each mission was a test of endurance, skill, and nerve. Her mind was a blur of calculations: altitude, velocity, missile trajectories, enemy positions, civilian locations. Every detail mattered. Her radio crackled again. "Rook, you're cleared to return to base for refuel and repairs." She hesitated. Retreat meant safety, but it also meant leaving the remaining civilians and soldiers exposed. Avery's hands tightened ground the throttle. "I don't retreat when people need me," she thought. "Negative," she responded firmly. "I'm continuing the mission. Prioritize ground safety and civilian evacuation. I'll cover the airspace." It was reckless, it was dangerous, but it was her code. She wasn't just a pilot, she was a guardian in the sky. The enemy was relentless, sending wave after wave of fighters. Avery dodged, fired, maneuvered, and coordinated strikes with surgical precision. Explosions illuminated the city below, like flashes of lightning in a stormy night. The screams, the chaos, the unrelenting pressure, it all fused into a singular focus: survive, protect, fight. Hours later, as the sun began to set over the horizon, the intensity finally eased. Enemy forces had retreated for now, leaving destruction in their wake, but sparing many lives due to Avery's relentless cover. Her jet was battered, systems warning of critical damage. She had survived, but just barely. Avery finally allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The city was scarred, but civilians had escaped. Her wingman was gone. Countless others, too. The cost was staggering. She could feel it in her bones, the weight of lives lost and saved, the raw toll of a war that had no mercy. She looked out at the horizon, fiery streaks of sunset blending with the smoke rising from the city. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more battles, more impossible choices. But for tonight, Avery Rook Carter had done the impossible. She had fought through the inferno, protected those in her path, and survived when so many had fallen. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The war wasn't just in the skies. It was in every heartbeat, every choice, every life she touched. And Rook had made her choice. She would fight until the very end. The war had no mercy, and neither did the streets. After days of relentless sorties and high-altitude strikes, Avery Rook Carter found herself descending into the chaos of the urban battlefield. Satellite images showed a city scarred by conflict: burned-out vehicles, crumbling buildings, smoke rising from every corner. Intelligence suggested pockets of enemy forces had dug in, using civilians as shields. The mission had shifted. Precision strikes weren't enough. Now, she and a small ground unit had to secure key areas, evacuate trapped civilians, and extract intelligence from hostile territory. She landed at the makeshift forward operating base, dust and debris kicking up around the landing zone. Her boots hit the cracked asphalt, heart still racing from the flight. Around her, soldiers moved with military precision, but the exhaustion in their eyes mirrored her own. Every face told a story: fear, determination, loss. "Rook," called Lieutenant Marquez, her ground commander, "we've got snipers in Sector 7, civilians trapped, and reports of IEDs along the East Corridor. We move fast or they don't make it." Avery tightened her grip on her rifle. Flight had always been her element: skies, speed, distance. But now she was on the ground, surrounded by shadows, uncertainty, and danger from every direction. Urban combat was a predator. It could kill in an instant, strike without warning. Every step, every corner, every doorway could hide death. Her unit advanced through narrow streets, the sound of gunfire and distant explosions echoing like a grim symphony. Smoke curled from shattered windows, mixing with dust to create a choking haze. Civilians huddled in alleys, their faces pale and fearful. Avery knelt beside a mother clutching her child, gesturing for them to follow her to safety. "Stay close," she shouted over the gunfire. Her voice was firm, commanding, yet reassuring. The child's tiny hand gripped hers tightly, a silent plea that fueled her determination. Then came the ambush. From the rooftops, enemy combatants opened fire. Bullets pinged off concrete, shrapnel tearing through walls. The unit dove for cover, returning fire as Avery's instincts sharpened to a razor's edge. Every movement counted. She fired with precision, taking down threats while signaling civilians to move. A grenade exploded near the group, throwing Avery to the ground. Pain shot through her arm, but she pushed it aside. There was no time to tend wounds. Lives depended on speed, courage, and decisions that could not be delayed. "Rook, Sector 7, Marquez shouted. "Snipers on rooftops, civilians trapped." Avery assessed the situation. Enemy forces were entrenched, every angle covered. Retreat would mean abandoning innocents. A frontal assault could be suicidal. She scanned the environment, calculating. Then she acted. She grabbed a smoke grenade, rolled it towards the enemy's position, and in the confusion, sprinted with 2 civilians towards a safer building. Bullets whizzed past her head, the metallic whistle slicing the air. Every heartbeat felt amplified, every second stretched into an eternity. Inside the building, Avery barricaded the door and signaled for air support. Minutes later, an F-15 squadron arrived overhead, familiar, comforting, a reminder that the sky could still offer protection. Bombs and precision strikes neutralized the rooftop snipers, giving the trapped civilians a chance to escape. But relief was fleeting. The enemy had anticipated reinforcements. Hidden explosives littered the streets, and insurgents attacked from underground tunnels, emerging unpredictably. Avery's unit was now surrounded, forced into a deadly dance between ambushes above and below. A young soldier, barely 18, froze under fire. Avery grabbed his shoulder, locking eyes. "Focus. You move when I move. Trust me." Her voice was unwavering, a beacon amid the chaos. He nodded, shaking, but obeyed, following her through the labyrinth of alleys and debris. Hours passed like minutes, each engagement escalating in intensity. Avery felt exhaustion clawing at her muscles, her vision blurred from smoke, sweat, and adrenaline, yet she refused to falter. She had trained for extreme conditions, but nothing compared to the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Civilians depending on her, soldiers counting on her, lives hinging on her split-second decisions. Night fell, and with it an eerie silence. The enemy seemed to vanish, but Avery knew better. It was the calm before another storm. She huddled with her team in a partially destroyed building, treating wounds, rationing water, and planning the next move. Her mind raced through possibilities, anticipating attacks, exits, contingencies. "Tomorrow we hit the East Corridor," said Marquez. "It's risky. Mines, enemy forces, civilians still trapped. We move at dawn." Avery nodded. She barely slept, but sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her thoughts drifted briefly to home, Ohio, her sister Emily, her parents. Were they awake, watching the news, wondering if she was alive? She swallowed the pang of longing and focused back on the mission. I can't fail them. Not now. The first light of dawn brought with it new threats. Enemy patrols, improvised explosives, and the unpredictable chaos of urban combat awaited. Avery led the unit with precision, using every skill from her combat flight training to navigate the deadly streets. She was a strategist and a guardian, balancing offense and defense in a deadly game where mistakes were fatal. At one point, a building collapsed nearby, sending dust and debris into the air. Avery's team was scattered, some pinned under rubble. Without hesitation, she rushed to their aid, lifting heavy beams with sheer strength and guiding injured soldiers to safety. Her uniform was torn, dirt and blood streaked across her face, but she moved as if propelled by an unbreakable will. Hours later, after clearing the East Corridor and rescuing trapped civilians, Avery stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. Smoke still rose from damaged buildings, but the streets were quieter now. Her team had survived, civilians were safe, and the immediate danger had passed. For now. She sank to her knees, exhaustion hitting like a tidal wave. Every muscle ached, every nerve burned. Yet even in that moment of fatigue, her mind was alert. Tomorrow would bring another battle, another choice, another test of endurance. Avery Rook Carter knew one truth. The war had changed everything. Nothing would ever be the same. Not the cities, not the soldiers, not herself. And yet she had fought. She had survived. She had protected lives when chaos reigned. And she would keep fighting, no matter how impossible it became. The war had dragged on longer than anyone anticipated. Cities lay in ruins, borders had shifted, and the human cost was staggering. Yet Avery Rook Carter remained in the fight, her body exhausted but her resolve unshaken. Every sortie, every ground mission, every life saved had etched a new layer of steel into her spine. She had survived the sky, the streets, and the chaos that war threw at her. But now, the final test awaited. Command had issued one last critical operation: secure a strategic port city before enemy reinforcements arrived, evacuate civilians, and neutralize remaining hostile forces. It was a mission layered with danger and urgency, the kind that would decide not only the tactical outcome, but the safety of thousands. Avery briefed her team, her voice calm and authoritative despite the tension. "We move at first light. Intel indicates enemy bunkers, sniper positions, and potential traps along every major route. Our priority is civilians. If we succeed, countless lives are saved. Fail, and we don't even want to consider that." Her soldiers nodded, trusting her implicitly. They had followed her through infernos before. They would follow her again. The dawn sky was painted in streaks of orange and red, reflecting off the smoke that still lingered from previous battles. Avery climbed into her jet, joined by Falcon, the few surviving members of her squadron, as they prepared for a coordinated strike. The city below was a labyrinth of twisted streets, rubble, and terror. Every second mattered. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. The first phase was the airstrike. Avery navigated the skies with surgical precision, dodging anti-aircraft fire while coordinating bombing runs that cleared paths for ground units. Explosions erupted, shaking the earth below, yet civilians were spared, thanks to her expert targeting. Her fingers flew over the controls, each adjustment calculated to perfection. Then came the ground insertion. Avery landed near a damaged bridge where civilians were trapped, hemmed in by enemy fire and debris. She leapt from her jet and sprinted toward them, the whistle of bullets cutting through the air like knives. She reached the group, women, children, and the elderly, their faces pale with fear, and led them through the safest path she could find. One young boy tripped and cried out. Avery scooped him into her arms without hesitation, sprinting through the chaos. Her boots pounded against broken asphalt as she guided them toward safety. Enemy snipers had anticipated the evacuation. Bullets ricocheted off walls, some dangerously close. Avery fired back, each shot precise, suppressing threats while ensuring civilians moved unharmed. Her heart pounded, but fear was a luxury she could not afford. Every life she protected reinforced her determination. As the last group reached temporary safety, reports came in. Enemy reinforcements were advancing from 3 directions, heavily armed and fast-moving. Avery realized the city would become a death trap if they didn't act quickly. She coordinated with Falcon and the remaining soldiers for a final push, a decisive strike to eliminate enemy command centers and secure the city. The operation demanded perfect timing, airstrikes synchronized with ground assaults, snipers neutralized, and civilians kept out of harm's way. Avery led from the front. Her team moved like shadows through the ruined streets, clearing each block with methodical precision. Mines, booby traps, and hidden snipers tested every ounce of their skill and courage. A sudden explosion threw Avery to the ground, her shoulder burning with pain, but she pushed on. Retreat was not an option. Lives depended on her. Hours passed in a blur of fire, smoke, and adrenaline.
Enemy forces were fierce, but Avery's leadership and strategy prevailed. Slowly, systematically, the city was secured. Enemy bunkers were destroyed, civilians evacuated, and the remaining combatants either surrendered or fled. By late afternoon, the city was quiet, the echo of battle replaced by the distant cries of relief and gratitude. Avery stood on a rooftop, surveying the destruction and the people who had survived because of her efforts. She was battered, bruised, and weary beyond measure, but a deep satisfaction filled her chest. She had fought through the storm and emerged victorious, not in glory, but in service to those who could not protect themselves. Yet the cost was visible. Buildings lay in ruins, streets were littered with debris, and lives had been lost despite her best efforts. Avery's thoughts turned to her fallen comrades, especially Falcon, who had given everything in the early days of the war. She bowed her head in silent respect, remembering the sacrifices that made this moment possible. When news crews arrived to document the aftermath, Avery refused interviews. She didn't need accolades or recognition. Her victory was measured not in headlines, but in the lives she had saved and the hope she had preserved in a city that had once teetered on the brink of annihilation. Later, in the temporary base, she allowed herself a quiet moment. The adrenaline ebbed, exhaustion took hold, and the weight of all she had endured settled into her bones. She thought of home, Ohio, her sister Emily, the life waiting for her beyond the war. She realized she had changed. War had forced her to confront mortality, fear, and the limits of human endurance, and she had not broken. She had fought, survived, and led with courage when it mattered most. In the days following, Avery was awarded honors for bravery and strategic brilliance. Military leaders praised her leadership. Civilians credited her with saving thousands of lives. Yet she remained humble. Her true victory was quieter. It was in the faces of those she had protected, the children she had guided to safety, and the soldiers who had trusted her with their lives. As she prepared to leave the war zone, Avery stood once more on a rooftop overlooking the city. Smoke still curled from the ruins, but there was life. People rebuilt, children laughed amidst the rubble, and soldiers cleaned their weapons, ready for whatever came next. She allowed herself a small smile, a rare moment of peace. You don't fight because the world is fair. You fight because someone has to stand when the world is broken. Her story became legend, not for the battles she won, but for the courage, resilience, and humanity she displayed in the face of unimaginable adversity. She had survived the impossible, protected the helpless, and stood tall when the world around her had been consumed by chaos. And as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, Avery Rook Carter walked away from the battlefield, not as a hero seeking fame, but as a soldier who did what was right and had fought till the very end.